What's up YouTube, Capital G here, showing you guys that low down dirty X-Saber Sea Monster of Theseus hand loop deck that basically can obliterate your opponent's entire 5-card opening hand before they've even had a chance to give any thought as to what cards they actually want to play. This is one of those decks that basically takes your opponent out of the game before they've ever even gotten into the game. Now, I'm sure some of you guys are probably not familiar with this deck. Maybe you actually missed the demonstration video that I posted a couple of days ago. Don't worry. If you're like me and you're a visual learner, I'll have that video probably in the description of this one. But I guess to kind of boil it down, this is a deck that wants to summon Gothams turn 1. You want to use your other X-Sabers as basically fodder to just kind of discard your opponent's entire opening hand, and you want to basically grind the game down into a top deck where obviously you're at a huge advantage because you're the one who has the 3100 Gothams and you're constantly putting pressure on your opponent. If your opponent is playing like a combo oriented deck, or God forbid a pendulum deck where you pretty much need like 2 cards in your pendulum zones and then monsters to even like summon, like they're going to be in a really tight and shitty position because you're constantly putting so much pressure on them, and by the time they've gotten all their combo pieces kind of brought together, you've basically killed them because you've been attacking them with a 3100 monster. And a lot of times you won't just have Gothams on the field by itself. You'll either have like a couple of back row, or you'll have another monster in your hand waiting to be normal summoned during your next turn. Now, I'm sure some of you guys are looking at this deck. You see, obviously, it's not a pure version of X-Sabers, and you're like, maybe what's going on here, Cap? Why are you running 7 different plants? Okay, let's start there. So the Predaplant engine is in here primarily as a way to get Invoker extremely easily. You need to get to Invoker turn 1 because that's half of the way that you're actually going to get to your consistent turn 1 Gothams. Scorpio and Darling Cobra are both level 3. Basically, you get to Scorpio, you discard a monster card, and then you summon Darling Cobra. But at the same time, you're not just summoning Bogart Knights, or excuse me, you're not just summoning Bogart Knights out of the Invoker just to have Bogart Knight on the field. This card right here, Darling Cobra, when it's special summoned from Scorpio, it actually searches Instant Fusion or Transcendental Fusion straight from the deck. Most of the time, you're going to go for Instant Fusion because that gets you Theseus, and when you combine Theseus and Bogart Knight, obviously that's how you get your Gothams, and you just start ripping your opponent's hand. At that point, you've already got 2 X-Sabers on field, so your opponent's already guaranteed to lose 2 cards. But considering this deck has so many different Monster Reborns and Fold Troll, this deck has Gothams Emergency Call, Second Call, Soul Charge. That's how you start basically getting the 5 cards and just ripping their opponents, or ripping their entire opening hand apart. Now, truth be told, the only reason that Lonefire Blossom is even in this deck is to get to like Scorpio. You pretty much have to cross your fingers and hope you never draw Darling Cobra, because it's really shitty. If you do, your entire combo could pretty much fall to pieces. But there are actually other ways of getting to the turn 1 Invoker. That's why you pretty much play like the Speedroid engine. Everybody knows at this point that Speedroid Terratop is pretty much just an instant 1-card rank 3 play without using your normal summon. And it's kind of weird in this deck because your normal summon is usually reserved to getting the Predaplant engine out, whether that be Lonefire Blossom or summoning Scorpio. And I'm sure some of you guys are looking and you're thinking, damn, Cap, you have a lot of normal summons in this deck like X-Saber Airbellum and Full Helm Knight and Ember's Blade. Why are you running all these other little X-Sabers when, for the most part, the only X-Sabers you really kind of showed in the video, the important ones were, basically Fold Troll, Bogart Knights, and then the ones in the extra deck, Gothams and Invoker. The reason that you run these other guys and you run a couple of them is because, number one, they are level 3. So, like, if you're in that top deck war with your opponent where you've got the Gothams and you're beating their ass, like, these are good monsters to actually top deck. They're decent standalone monsters. Ember's Blade is obviously a monster that floats. Full Helm Knight can block and attack, and these 2 guys give you the ability to actually go into synchro plays, and they're all level 3, so they work really well because let's say that you soul charge back, I don't know, a Scorpio, and it's really not doing that much. It doesn't have the greatest stats, 1200 attack. If you top deck like an X-Saber Airbellum or you top deck a Full Helm Knight, then you have the ability to go into another Invoker, and it's just like you just put more pressure on your opponents. And you also need monsters to actually discard for Scorpio's effect. Like, it's weird. You never really want to normal summon these guys turn 1, but you always want them in your hand because you want to discard them. You want to go for Invoker, bring out Gothams, and then a lot of times you just kind of want a Monster Reborn ignoring them to just throw them at your opponent's opening hand. Transcendental Fusion is a card that's going to go overlooked, and you guys can feel free to make like adjustments to this deck as you guys see fit. I've actually added a bunch of cards right here in the side deck that you guys can, like, you know, possibly throw on the deck if you need more removal, or if you're like, I don't need 3 copies of Gotham's Emergency Call, I'm gonna throw in a Vanities instead. Do not take Transcendental Fusion out of this deck, guys. It's one of the ways that this deck has a very strong going second. Like, you know, historically these type of decks that don't run any like back row removal or that are kind of gimmicky, they're kind of go first or bust. A lot of times if your opponent makes like a stun field, you basically just scoop because you have no way of playing around it. But if your opponent is playing a deck like DDDs and they have like Siegfried on the board, or they have Titanic Galaxy, if you're defending against a Naturia Beast because Spirals put that on the board turn 1, you can actually do things. Like if you're facing down a Totally Awesome or something like that, and it's because of Transcendental Fusion, which of course is searchable from Darling Cobra. If you play Transcendental Fusion, your opponent cannot respond in any way. So basically all of those stun monsters do jack shits, and at that point you pretty much just bring out Chimera Rafflesia, and since the monsters get summoned back, you actually get to go for another rank 3 play as well. That's why I thought about maybe you could throw in like a Break Sword, maybe take out the copy of Utopic Future, but it's basically a way of fighting back against like really strong opening boards if you're going second. And it might look a little weird. I know you guys are like, damn, Cap, you're running 10 traps in a deck that's supposed to be like a turn 1 hand loop. That seems a little weird. The thing about it is, because there are decks like DDDs in the format where you might unfortunately loop things like Green Slime and Necro Slime out of their hand, or because your opponent could top like Instant Fusion, you want to get your Gothams and you want to have like one defensive card to kind of back him up with. So like, yeah, Gothams is really good, but it's not uncrackable. I mean, your opponent can top deck like a Terratop, or they can top deck like a Barrage, the Zodiac Barrage. They can top deck Instant Fusion, and they could actually just kill your Gothams, and you might end up losing that top deck war. But if you have Gothams plus like a Solemn, or you have Gothams plus a Dimensional Barrier, what the fuck your opponent gonna do to that? Like, now the chances are you've taken your victory from like 90% and you've basically given it that extra 9.9%, because whatever card they are lucky enough to top deck, if it isn't out to your actual Gothams, not named like, I don't know, Regeki or Interrupted Slumber, then it's probably gonna fall to this card. So this is just a fun little deck. Yeah, obviously the deck wants to go first. It wants to loop a ton of cards out of your opponent's hand. If you run into Dark World, just rest in fucking pepperonis, because you are going to lose 100% of the time. But this deck actually can be played going second because of the Predaplant engine, because of things like Transcendental Fusion, and the fact that your opponent can't Solemn this card. They can't negate it with Naturia Beast or Totally Awesome, or, you know, everybody talks about how Yu-Gi-Oh is like so much of a turn 1 stun game, and it's like, this is just a perfect answer to that. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. I know a lot of times people don't actually like when I showcase these kind of trolly degenerate decks, but I mean, come on guys, we like to fuck around and troll the meta sometimes. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please give the video a big thumbs up. Thank you guys for watching as always, and subscribe if you have not already.